You are listening to Crime Unraveled, a Buck Taylor novel by Chuck Morgan.
Chapter 40. Bax hung up from her call with Buck, and didn't waste any time. She needed a charter pilot, and she knew just who to call. Mac Price answered on the second ring. She explained what she needed, and Mac told her he was just puttering around the hangar and to head on over. Bax hung up, grabbed her backpack, ran out of the B&B, and slid into her Jeep. She left the parking lot and headed for the Grand Junction Airport. Mac Price landed his Beechcraft King Air 250 on the end of the runway at the Tonopah Airport like he was landing on a cloud. He throttled back the power and rolled onto the taxiway, stopping outside the local fixed base operator, FBO. Bax always liked flying with Mac. He was personable and funny, and his white hair gave her a sense of security. Mac was 5'10" and rail-thin. He wore his leather bomber jacket with pride, having spent 20 years flying jet fighters, first in Korea and then in the early years of the Vietnam War. After his hitch in the Air Force, Mac started his own charter operation and, with almost 50,000 hours of flying, was one of the most experienced pilots Bax knew. Mac told her he would camp out at the FBO until she was ready to head home, and if she needed to stay overnight, he was okay with that. His next charter wasn't for another 72 hours, so he had time to wait for her. She thanked him with a big hug and headed out the front door to the waiting Nevada State Police SUV. The young Native American trooper spotted her coming out of the terminal and stepped away from his SUV with his hand extended. "Agent Baxter, Ron Yellowknife." They shook hands. "Nice to meet you, Ron. Please call me Bax." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You made good time. Do you need to stop to eat or anything before we head to the hotel?" "No thanks, Ron. Let's get this over with." They slid into the SUV, and Ron pulled out of the parking lot and headed west on US Highway 6. He asked about the bombing and the rock slide, and Bax gave him a quick debrief. "So you think this fella might have been involved?" asked Ron. "We'll know in a little while." Ron drove into Tonopah and turned off US 6 onto South Erie Main Street. They drove for a couple of blocks, and he turned into the parking lot of the Sundowner Motel. He drove through the lot and parked next to another state police SUV. Bax slid out of the passenger seat as the door to Unit 108 opened and another trooper stepped out. He introduced himself as Charlie Gibbons, and they shook hands. "You want me to stay inside with you?" asked Charlie. Bax laughed. "I'll be fine, Charlie. Thanks for asking." He stepped aside, and Bax walked into the room and closed the door. Jack Mortensen sat on the edge of the bed. He looked up as Bax entered. She walked over, shook his hand, and introduced herself. She pulled a laminated card out of her back pocket and read him his Miranda rights. She told him that he was not under arrest, that reading him his rights was for his protection, and that at any point during the interview he could stop and ask for an attorney. He told her he understood them. "Mr. Mortensen, do you want to waive your right to an attorney and talk with me? The captain told me you were willing to return to Colorado if needed." "Am I being charged with anything?" he asked. "Right now, you're a material witness. That could change once this interview is over." He sat for a few minutes, mulling over the question. "Can I ask you something? Is my wife okay?" Bax looked at him. "No, sir. I'm sorry to have to tell you, but your wife was found dead in your home. You have my deepest condolences. That was the primary reason we issued the notice on you. We wanted to talk to you about what, if anything, might have led to your wife's death." Tears formed in his eyes, and he wiped them with the back of his hand. "I figured they wouldn't hurt her if I wasn't around, and she didn't know anything. Did Heinrich kill her?" "Why do you ask?" asked Bax. "Because those two goons work for the demolition company, and they do anything he asks. We're not sure who murdered her, but we have one of the demo guys in custody." "What about the other one?" "He was killed in a standoff with police," said Bax. Jack got quiet again. He rubbed his face with his hands and looked at Bax. "We're in big trouble, aren't we?" "Who is we, Mr. Mortensen?" asked Bax. "Tim and I, Tim Woodman. We work together at Velasquez Mining." "Mr. Mortensen. Tim Woodman was murdered the morning following the rockslide." "I'm sorry." "Oh fuck," he said. "That's why they were at my house. To kill me too. Instead, I got Betty killed." Tears ran down his face, and he covered his face with his hands. Bax let him cry. Mortensen had a good cry, and when he finished, he wiped his eyes and said, "If you hand me my backpack, I'll give you something that explains everything." Bax stepped over to the backpack, opened it, looked inside for any weapons, and handed it to Jack. He opened a small side pocket and handed her a silver thumb drive. "This was our insurance policy, Tim and mine. Once we understood what we had been working on and realized the scope of the plan, we decided we needed to put all the information somewhere safe. You'll find emails, texts, and all our research on there. Should be enough to prosecute everyone involved." He stood up. "Will you excuse me? I feel sick." Jack stepped around her, walked into the bathroom, and closed the door. The gunshot made her jump, and she ran to the door with her pistol drawn just as the two troopers pushed open the door with guns drawn. Bax slammed her foot into the door and the lock blew apart. She stepped into the bathroom and found Jack sitting in the bloody tub with blood all over the walls. A small pocket pistol was lying in the tub next to him. She reached down, checked for a pulse, looked at the two troopers, and shook her head. Ron clicked the mic hooked to his collar and requested a supervisor, paramedics, and the medical examiner. Within 15 minutes, the parking lot was packed with local and state emergency vehicles. Captain Fisher and Tonopah Police Department Detective Allison Marsh took control of the scene. 5 hours after arriving in Tonopah, Bax was leaning against the trooper's SUV when Detective Marsh, a pretty blonde with blue eyes and a pleasant demeanor, leaned against the hood next to her. "Looks like he had the little .22 in a boot holster. The troopers never checked since he was being looked at as a material witness, not a suspect," she said. Bax shook her head. "I fucked up. I should have checked. I checked his backpack when he asked for it, but I never checked him. No one's at fault here, Agent Baxter. I read all your statements. It was a tragic accident, and that's what my report will say. He had been in that room for 7 hours before you got here. He could have shot himself at any time. Did you at least get the answers you came looking for?" Bax held up the thumb drive. "I hope so." She slipped the drive into a small evidence bag she pulled out of her pocket and sealed it. Detective Marsh pushed off the hood and extended her hand. "I've got a lot to do. You're free to go, Agent Baxter. If I have any questions, I'll give you a call." She stepped away, stopped, and turned. "I hope you catch the bastards that blew up that canyon." She turned and walked away. Bax walked over and spoke with the two troopers and Captain Fisher. Since they had all given their statements, there was no issue with speaking to one another. Bax thanked them for their help and asked if she could get a ride back to the airport. Captain Fisher asked Ron to drive her, and they shook hands. She pulled out her phone as they walked towards the SUV and called Mac, who told her he'd be ready when she got there. It was a long, quiet flight back to Grand Junction.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of Crime Unraveled, a Buck Taylor novel by Chuck Morgan. You can find the entire crime series as well as other novels by Chuck Morgan at chuckmorganbooks.com or on Amazon.